A very warm good morning to all of you. Nice to have a warm good morning in this season. In the morning it was a bit foggy and now the sun is out in full swing. So I hope all of you are doing good. And the students who have written the exam this year, some of them have also joined us. I expect most of the people who would be joining us live would be the ones who would be writing this exam in the years to come. I so hope that others have also joined, that means those who have written the exam this year, to see how well did they attempt, how well did they write the answer to the questions. Let me tell you in the beginning, you all must have written, should have written and have written very good answers. There is no need to worry absolutely anything about what you have written in the exam. We are discussing these questions. We have had the benefit of number of days to prepare our answers, to tell you what should you be writing in the answer, to form a proper structure of the answer, and hence get ourselves evaluated in a very good manner, in an excellent manner. We have had so many meetings, discussions, model answers before us, time to think. Those of you who have written the exam and those of you who will be writing the exam in future, those you don't have that benefit that we do have, which we do right now. So therefore, nobody should worry about मैंने ये आंसर में नहीं लिखा, मैंने वो नहीं लिखा, मेरे आंसर में इतने मार्क्स आएंगे, इतने नहीं आएंगे. No, there is no need to worry about anything. All of you have done well and all of you will be doing very well. This is the starting message that I would want to give to anybody who is watching this session. Let's begin our discussion. I hope all of you have seen the syllabus, all of you have seen the questions and know which part of the syllabus do they belong to. For your reference, the questions that I'll be discussing, the 8 questions that have been asked this year, I have also separately marked which topic or subtopic from the syllabus these questions have been asked from. If you look at the trend of previous years, since past 3 years, 8 questions have been asked in prelims, in mains examination. 8 questions have been asked in mains examination from economics. Year before that 10 were asked, but on average we are seeing now 8 questions are usually asked. If you see on your screens, you'll also see slides about the trends of questions, the number of questions that have been asked. So 8 questions, and these 8 questions are from varied spheres, varied subtopics. If you look at the topic wise distribution, most of the questions that are asked are from agriculture and this broad topic of growth and development. Now in this broad topic of growth and development, I've tried to include all the basic macroeconomics as well. Macroeconomics as well are, for example, the first chapter of our national income accounting, chapter on investments, chapters that concern these topics from the economic survey. So this growth and development, this is that broad topic. Inclusive growth included in this. So this is a very broad topic. The first 30%, the first portion of this pie chart that you see, growth and development, that's a very broad topic, and from that about 30% of questions have been asked. The next big chunk of questions are from industry and trade. This year they asked only one question. I mean, you can broadly categorize as one question, but not even one directly from this topic. Otherwise, they usually ask questions from this. So in this industry and trade, I usually include foreign trade, exports, employment, all these things. These are the things that I include in this subtopic. And finally, if you see the biggest chunk of questions, they have been asked from agriculture. Every year you would see that at least 3 questions out of 8, at least 3 questions, sometimes 4, this time 4 questions are asked from agriculture. Now agriculture, again, it's a very broad topic in itself. There are multiple facets. From farm to fork, you have multiple aspects of agriculture, from production to cropping pattern to marketing to various inputs, irrigation systems. So there are, agriculture itself is a very big topic, and it's no surprise then that most of the questions have been asked from agriculture only. Some questions are asked, one question every year you'll see. Every year one question is from budgeting. One question every year is from budgeting. And they don't ask questions such as what is performance budgeting, what is outcome budgeting. They don't ask questions like this. They ask questions regarding some certain aspect of budget, certain specific aspect of budget. Since 2 years they have been asking question on GST. This year they asked a question on GST, last year they asked a question on GST, and in 2017, year before that, they asked a question on GST. So abhi 2 saal lagatar they asked a question on GST. They have asked a question on gender budgeting. They have asked a question on budgeting techniques in view of liberalized economy. After 1991, we have opened up on economy, and what are the budgeting constraints that we have or expenditure management constraints that we have. I think this question was asked last year. Very beautiful question. So this is the broad distribution of topics from which questions have been asked. Let's start with our discussion straight away. Let's look at the first question that was asked this year. The first question was, explain intragenerational and intergenerational issues of equity from the perspective of inclusive growth and sustainable development. Such a broad question, such a broad question. There are 4 concepts that you have to have knowledge about to write answer to this question. You should know about equity, and then you should know about intergenerational and intragenerational. Then you should know about what is inclusive growth. Then you should know about sustainable development. And you'll have to mix all these things together in some form which the question is asking. It is not merely the knowledge of definitions of these words, these terms, that is required in this answer. In your answer, you should not be writing equity means this, intergenerational means this, intragenerational means this, and then write sustainable development means this and inclusive growth means this. Ye 4 concepts, if you start writing definitions of these 4 concepts, 1.5 page would be filled. You have got 2 pages to write this answer. Merely 150 words mein aapko answer khatam karna hai. So you cannot focus on writing elaborate definitions of these concepts. Understand the question. Question is, you have to explain intragenerational and intergenerational issues of equity from the perspective of inclusive growth and sustainable development. That means spend some time in understanding what is the examiner trying to ask. I usually tell this in the class as well as my test discussions. I tell this, that if you have 10 minutes of time to write an answer, for example, in this 10 marks question, you have about 9 minutes of time to write one answer. You should be spending around 2 minutes of your time without raising your pen. Without raising your pen as in trying to understand the question. We are in a habit of, we see that we have to attempt 20 questions, elaborately write the answers to them so that we are in a position to get best marks. And in that process, what we end up doing is we end up devoting minimum time to reading and understanding the question. We spend more time in writing the answer, thinking about what will I write, then write that thing, then again raise our pen, then think what more I have to write, then again start writing. A very inefficient way to write answers. The efficient way to write your answer is that you spend 2 minutes of your time in reading the question and understanding what is the requirement. What is the requirement here? The requirement is that you have to explain this concept of equity. You have to explain this concept of equity in the light of model of growth, which is inclusive growth, growth being inclusive and growth being sustainable. You have to explain this equity from the perspective of inclusive and sustainable growth. And which aspect of equity? You have to explain inter and intragenerational. Focus should be on explaining that how will inclusive growth and sustainable growth address the issue of present equity, address the issue of equity that may arise between generations. This should be the focus. The topic from which this question has been asked, multiple topics can be related to it. The first part of your syllabus, mains ka syllabus mein jo first part hai, that is the subtopic which is in focus here. Issues related to planning and mobilization of resources, growth and development, employment, inclusive growth and issues arising from it. ये जो फर्स्ट टॉपिक है आपका सिलेबस के अंदर, This is the topic which is relevant here. How should you be writing the answer to this question? Well, what is meant by intergenerational equity and intragenerational equity? Equity means just, fair, equitable distribution of resources, of benefits, of opportunities. Pursuit of inclusive growth. What is inclusive growth? It will help you to answer this question of equity. The model of growth that we tend to pursue is most of the times top down or trickle down. In that trickle down model of growth, we have the top of the people growing, the top of the pyramid growing, and the benefits of growth are being distributed via an active government to the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid. This is your pyramid, let's say, pyramid as in population. These are the people at the top, these are the people at the bottom. These people grow and the benefit of growth are redistributed by the government to the people at the bottom. Inclusive growth means, inclusive growth is not merely another model of pro-poor growth. Every model of growth that has been pursued is pro-poor, is trickle down, not pro-poor. It is obviously pro-poor. But what is special about inclusive growth? Special thing about inclusive growth is that it is a growth in which the people who are at the bottom are not merely passive recipients of growth. They are rather active contributors to the growth process. Active contributors to the growth process, not merely passive recipients. And if you understand this aspect, that these people are active participants, not passive beneficiaries of the growth process, then you will be able to answer the issue of intergenerational inequity or intragenerational equity. Inequity arises from these people at the top growing and the bottom not growing, merely receiving benefits. To address inequity, you need inclusive growth so that people at the bottom become contributors to the growth process. And what else would you write in this? जब आप intragenerational equity की बात कर रहे हो through inclusive growth, you should be writing that it is equity of opportunities or availability of opportunities, making them skilled, providing them with adequate opportunities, with skill, with education, with health, so that they are able to contribute. It is not that they don't want to contribute, they should be made able to contribute. This would be helped by inclusive growth. Inclusive growth addressing the aspect of intragenerational inequity or intragenerational equity, issues of equity. What about sustainable growth? Again, the manner in which you define sustainable growth. Sustainable growth is growth of the present without compromising the ability to grow of the future. Growth of the present without compromising the ability to grow of the future. That is what sustainable growth is. How can you compromise this with, because you have incorporated the ability of future generation to go? That means you are not talking about intergenerational inequity or intergenerational equity, whatever way you want to put it. Equity of opportunity between the present generation and the future generation. If you utilize the resources, environmental aspect आप सब लिख सकते हो. Write down the aspect of debt here. Debt becomes an important aspect because debt creates intergenerational inequity. We borrow from the future to spend today. Is it that the spending that we are doing today, is it leading to better circumstances, better situations, better opportunity to the future from which we have borrowed? The government borrows and the government is going to, if government borrows something, government is going to repay it back. How will the government repay it back? Government will repay it back by taxing. Who will be taxed? The future generations are going to be taxed. For whom? The benefit of present. So is it sustainable? There has to be limit to borrowing then. I'm ignoring the environmental aspect because I think that all of you would have written environmental aspect in this. Destruction of environment for present use rather than utilization of resources for present use and hence compromising the ability of the future generation to use those. I am assuming that you would have written all those aspects in sustainable growth. That is obviously very important part. I am talking about another aspect of debt, of government spending. Is the government spending sustainable, or is the taxation system sustainable, All that would also form part of sustainable growth, addressing the issue of intergenerational inequity. This is how you should be writing your answer. Structure your answer around this concept of equity and then deal with this equity concept from the perspective of inclusive growth, that how does inclusive growth address inter and intragenerational inequity, and how does sustainable growth address inter and intragenerational inequity. I hope this is clear to everybody. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 2. Define potential GDP and explain its determinants. What are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing its potential GDP? Potential GDP. Now, this is a topic on which I spent some time in my initial classes. The first 2 or 3 classes are spent in explaining these concepts: production possibility curve, a country's the concept of opportunity cost, the concept of potential GDP. All these come from this particular concept. And what usually happens is sometimes students are not very happy that these type of questions are not asked in the exam. I don't know who informs them that these questions are not relevant or not important from the point of view of exams, because if you go and pick up every year's paper, mains examination paper from last 10 years, every year you will find one question which is of this basic nature. एकदम basic nature का question होता है. What is potential GDP? One approach is, or one way is, that you simply know the meaning of the word potential, you know the meaning of the word GDP, and then you are trying to answer in the dark, trying to link these two terms and writing the answer. Okay, this is the potential GDP. That would be largely correct, but that would not be specific. That cannot fetch you good marks. This concept of potential GDP, if you are simply writing what is the potential output that a country can produce, that is potential GDP. Well, certainly yes, that is how you define potential GDP, but what next? If you incorporate the concept of production possibility frontier in your answer, then your answer looks informed answer, like a person who has studied the concept is writing this. If you introduce the concept of opportunity cost, as in how to utilize resources to maximize the output, how to make choice to maximize the output, if you introduce that concept in your answer, the concept of opportunity cost, production possibility frontier, then your answer looks a well-informed answer, not a vague answer, a general answer. As I said, certainly yes, potential GDP is the total amount of output that you can produce, potentially can produce, that is potential GDP. But how do you attain that potential GDP? Uske liye you will have to write certain specific aspects. Again, those of you who may not have written these concepts in the answer, again, as I said, no need to worry about it. Your answer is largely correct, largely correct. A person who may have written these concepts may get 1 mark more than you or 2 marks more than you, but that is nothing to worry about. That should not be a cause of concern. Certainly not a cause of concern. What is potential GDP and explain its determinants? What are the determinants of potential GDP? The output that a country can produce using its existing resources and given the extent of technology, usko bolte hain potential GDP. Potential GDP is what a country can produce given its existing resources and given the level of technological development in the country. That is what is potential GDP. अगर हम केवल यहीं पे छोड़ दें that what a country can produce, there is no limit to what a country can produce. Why? You have now left the answer in between. Vague है आपकी term. Given current resources and given the current extent of technology that you have, what is it that the maximum you can produce? That means you use the existing resources to the maximum possible efficiency. That is what the concept of potential GDP is. What are its determinants? Well, determinants of potential GDP are not any different from determinants of GDP. GDP is final value of goods and services produced in the economy in a given year or in a given time period. That is GDP. Potential GDP, final value of goods and services that can be produced in the economy given the current amount of resources and the current technological level. That is what potential GDP would be. What would be its determinants? As I said, determinants are not different from determinants of GDP, but there is a one important difference. Potential GDP entails the concept of utilization of resources in the best possible manner. Utilization of resources in the manner through which output can be maximized. Utilization of resources in a manner through which output can be maximized. So output maximizing use of resources will lead to potential GDP. It is the quality of your factors of production that determines whether you will be able to achieve potential GDP or not. Quality of your factors of production. If skill exists, for example, आंसर में लिखना पड़ेगा ये चीज को, quality of factors of production, quality of capital employed, quality of labor employed. These are the things that will determine what is the output that is produced by your factors of production. If skill exists in the population and that skill is available only to a few people and not to the people who can get that skill, in that case, skill is available, technology is available, but it is not being used in a manner that can maximize the output. So determinant is the extent, the scope of quality of factors of production prevalent in the population or in different factors. Extent and scope and the quality of the factors of production prevalent in the country. That is the biggest determinant of potential GDP. A country will be able to achieve potential GDP if the skill is present, the technology is present, and it is available to be utilized by anybody who wants to utilize it. That is how potential GDP of a country can be reached. What are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing its potential GDP? Factors that have been inhibiting. Three-part question. There should be a proper structure to your answer. First, simply write a subheading. When you start your answer, give a subheading. पहली line में subheading लिखो. Potential GDP. Write down one line definition or two line definition. Next subheading, determinants of potential. Subheading must be clearly visible. Examiner should know that you have answered all the parts. Third subheading, factors that inhibit India from realizing its potential GDP. What can be the factors that inhibit India? Important factors are skill development, inequitable nature of growth or inequitable society, non-existence of scale at which technology can be exploited or technology can be used. Technology is available, but technology is costly. Technology is unaffordable. Existence of large informal economy inhibits India to achieve its potential GDP. MSMEs, for example. MSMEs do not get access to best resource which is available. Best resource is available, but is not available to MSMEs. Why would anybody, let's say, who graduates from, let's say, some IIM, go and work in an MSME? An MSME is largely a family-based enterprise, doesn't pay you well, and your scope of growth is restricted. Why would anybody who has the skill go and work in an MSME? That person who has skill would probably go and work abroad. Drain of resources, a very important factor that India is not able to realize its potential GDP. Drain of resources, drain of skill, drain of wealth. Factors that have inhibited India to realize its potential GDP. Unable to skill the population. The quality of graduates that we produce are not employable. Write down अपने आंसर में लिखो उस चीज को. That recent survey found out that only about 46% of the people who graduate are employable anywhere according to the relevant skill. So employability is less of people. That means you are not able to achieve the maximum that you can from your factors of production. Hence, you are not able to achieve your potential GDP. Factors that inhibit India from achieving its potential GDP. Your focus should be, जैसे मैंने अभी आपको 3 या 4 factors बताए. Your focus in your answer should not be to write down 10 different factors or 6 different factors so that कि आप ज़्यादा factors लिखो और आपको उसमें marks मिले. No. Your focus should be to elaborate properly with example one of those factors. Each of those factors, not one, each of those factors जो भी आप लिख रहे हो. With example, जैसे I told you about skill. So write down with example unskilled population or inability to scale. I told you about technology. I told you about availability of skilled resource or skilled employment to MSMEs or availability of finance to industry. So these are the factors that you should be writing which prohibit India from achieving its potential GDP. और उसमें इन फैक्टर्स में आगे आपको एक लाइन लिखनी पड़ेगी एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए that what is this factor, why is this factor and why is this factor a constraint on India's ability to achieve what it can produce. I hope you get the answer. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 3. What are the main constraints in transport and marketing of agriculture produce in India? What are the main constraints in transport and marketing of agriculture produce in India? So this topic, the question is from the topic transportation and marketing of agriculture produce and issues and related constraints. It's straight away this topic is mentioned in your syllabus. So no surprise this question has been asked. The answer to this question is straightforward. It should be your ability to structure your answer. Structure of the answer is important. बहुत ही straightforward आसान question है. As in, I don't think so there is even a need for me to give you what should be the answer to this. Main constraints in transport and marketing of agriculture produce. And because of what has been going on in the country since past 2-3 months, all of you must be now well aware about the constraints in agriculture marketing. सबको मालूम होगा. You must have read newspapers multiple times, multiple articles, exploring pros, cons, everything of what is the current agriculture marketing system. So all of you know answer to this question better than me. Trust me, you know it better than me. What are the constraints to transport? Improper infrastructure से start करेंगे. Yes, improper infrastructure. Not having pakka roads. The village roads are not of the quality and that leads to are not of good quality and the transportation mechanism is not advanced. And that leads to about 20% of our agriculture produce going waste every year, not making up to the marketing stage every year, about 20% of our produce. So that is a constraint or the main constraint in transport. Another constraint in transport is that, listen very carefully, the transportation infrastructure or the logistics infrastructure in our country is not well developed. Because to develop logistics infrastructure, storage is an integral part. Not merely transporting grains or transporting agriculture produce from one place to another, there must also be facilities to store grains or store other agriculture produce so that the produce is fresh. The entire burden should not be of transportation to transport goods from one place to another in their fresh form. You must supplement the transportation infrastructure with proper storage infrastructure. The storage infrastructure in the country is almost non-existent. There is virtually no participation of private sector in storage because of various acts, most importantly Essential Commodities Act. Because of that, storage infrastructure has not come up and that has not been able to complement the transportation infrastructure. So again, another constraint in transportation. At the same time, you can write agriculture produce. One other important point that you should be writing, agriculture produce is perishable in nature and therefore you need, for example, to transport perishable items, to transport animal produce in agriculture, animal produce, for example, transport fishes, part of allied sector of agriculture, to transport fruits and vegetables. You would require refrigerated trucks, which are costly, not available in India. Vaccine को transport करने के लिए we have trucks, as in we have very few number of trucks to transport vaccine. Think about the number of trucks that would be available to transport fruits and vegetables which are of perishable nature. Almost non-existent. So therefore again an important constraint in transportation infrastructure in our country. What are the constraints in marketing of agriculture produce? This all of you know very well. The biggest constraint comes from APMC Act, as in where the farmer is required to sell his produce in a designated area in a designated manner. The farmer is prone to be exploited. Why is the farmer prone to be exploited there? Simply because the farmer is under pressure to sell his produce all at one time. because there is no storage infrastructure, because the number of people who are buying from the farmer are less, and because the farmer has not had any income in past 6 months. पिछले 6 महीने में farmer has cultivated his produce, he has not earned anything from his agriculture produce in 6 months. It is only at one point of time, twice a year or thrice a year if you have 3 crops. It is only at one specific point of time that you will be earning your income of past 3-4 months. This fact is known by the person who is buying, and therefore the person who is buying exploits the farmer. The main issue, the main constraint in agriculture marketing. If farmer has the opportunity to store his produce, then some of this problem may be addressed. If farmer has the opportunity to sell his produce through a contract, then some of this problem may be addressed. If farmer has the opportunity to sell his produce to have an access to larger number of traders across the country or in a wider region, rather than constraining himself to a one specific mandi, then this problem can be further addressed. And finally, if farmer has the information about what are the expected prices in future, trading in future, if farmer has the knowledge about what are the expected prices in future, in that case also farmer can make better decision as far as marketing of his produce is concerned. So these become the constraints. Not having information about futures prices, not having access to larger number of traders in a larger area, not having access to better storage facilities, not having access to adequate information for selling his produce. And all this combined with the exploitative nature of trade, all these things create constraints for agriculture marketing in our country. So this is about the answer to this question. Let's move on to the next question, question number 4. What are the challenges and opportunities of food processing sector in our country? How can income of farmers be sustainably increased by encouraging food processing? Challenges and opportunities of food processing sector in our country. Straightforward answer लिख सकते हो इसका. Food processing, write down, analyze this food processing thing from farm to fork. First aspect, food processing is an industry. It would need an input, as in it would need raw material for processing. Is food available to be procured by the food processing industry? Answer is no. Only in items in which there is contract farming specifically allowed, only for those items industry can procure raw material, that is food, from the producer. Otherwise, industry would have to go to the market and be subject to exploitation of the APMC, and only then it can produce, which leads to increased costs, which leads to uncertainty in procurement, which leads to unavailability of uncertainty about the quality of produce which is being sold to the company, to the food processing industry. Constraints on the first constraints at the first step. Next step, at the processing stage. At the processing stage, you would require investments. Investments would only be coming in food processing sector when you know that there is surety of procurement. There are less constraints on exporting or selling your products. Then would somebody be willing to invest? I would set up a food processing plant if I know that my raw material is assured and my market in which I have to sell is assured. If that is not assured, the investment will be constrained. So again, second aspect, second constraint in food processing industry. Challenges and opportunities. Challenges की बात करें in food processing. Opportunities, huge opportunities in food processing. First opportunity is that it is a sunrise sector, as in it is a sector which is as of now picking up. It is a sector which is as of now not as prominent as it should be. Food processing industry has the opportunity, has the potential to employ people who can be freed from agriculture, who are disguised unemployed in agriculture. There is a huge workforce in agriculture who is not producing any substantial output. That workforce gets released. What is the industry which can gainfully deploy them, gainfully employ them? Their skill, अभी तो जो agriculture worker है, we consider them as unskilled workers. But when the industry comes up which recognizes their skill, those workers will no longer be unskilled. अब एक ऐसी industry है, there is an opportunity, there is an industry which recognizes these workers as skilled workers. Which industry is that? That is food processing industry. So potential or Opportunities of food processing industry, very important that it has the opportunity to absorb the excess employment from agriculture into this high value industrial sector. Another opportunity of food processing industry, opportunity of exports. India is one of the largest producers of fruits and vegetables in the world, largest producer of milk in the world. We have excess production of so many items going on. Through food processing industry, we can utilize this excess production to produce processed goods and cater to the demand of world, cater to the demand of a growing Indian economy, and hence add value to agriculture. If we are able to add value to agriculture, it can be rationally expected, it can be reasonably expected that part of that value would also go to the producer, that is the farmer. And hence these are the opportunities associated with food processing industry. How can income of farmers be sustainably increased by encouraging food processing? I have answered this question. Abhi मैंने answer किया है. How can income of farmers be increased? If food processing industry is able to create value, is able to sell its goods, export its goods, in that case, surety of procurement, indulging in contract farming, the increased value, some of that can go to the, would certainly go to the farmer in form of increased incomes, and hence income of farmers can be sustainably increased by encouraging food processing. The problem right now is that we have excess supply of items which farmers are producing, and because there is excess supply, the farmer is not able to get the desired value from the market. That excess supply of, for example, milk can be absorbed by milk processing industry, make skimmed milk powder, and therefore now from that you will be able to absorb much of the supply of milk. The milk farmer will get proper prices, and the farmer of milk which is selling milk to the industry may also get proper prices, will certainly get proper prices. So this is how farmers income can be sustainably increased. Let's move on to the next question. Now we are moving to the 15 marks question. Question number 11. Explain the meaning of investment in an economy in the terms of capital formation. Discuss the factors to be considered while designing a concession agreement between a public entity and a private entity. Well, I reserve the rights to brag about this again, but still, we'll explain the meaning of investment in an economy in terms of capital formation. If you read government documents regarding, for example, if you read economic survey, you will see when government comes out with its estimates of GDP in chapter number 1 of every year's economic survey. परसों आ जाएगा economic survey. In chapter number 1 of every year's economic survey, you will find that government gives estimates of GDP, and in that estimate of GDP, you will find investment, and within investment, you will find one entry under investment is gross fixed capital formation. What is capital formation? Explain the meaning of investment in an economy in terms of capital formation. देखो basic का question है. I mean, this is a question UPSC. I would like to comment on the questions like these. These are the questions that are so good questions. This question number 11 and question number 1 in this year's paper. Both these questions. These are the questions that you will have to answer, if you will be able to answer if you have studied NCERT and if you have had proper understanding of terms which are mentioned there. If you have read economic survey, if you have read NCERT, only then you will be able to answer these questions properly. Also that question of potential GDP. You need to have knowledge about the subject, not merely knowing about news, not merely knowing about that something has happened, therefore my preparation is complete. I know about something has happened, hence my preparation is complete. Knowledge about concepts. This question is testing that knowledge again. 3 questions we have seen in this year's paper out of 8. Out of 8, 3 questions which are testing your basic knowledge of economics. Meaning of investment in an economy in terms of capital formation. What is capital formation? Capital formation is investment by a company in certain assets that help in producing other goods, in capital goods. लैंड में इन्वेस्टमेंट को कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन नहीं बोलते हैं. लैंड में इन्वेस्टमेंट इज इन्वेस्टमेंट, हाउस में इन्वेस्टमेंट इज इन्वेस्टमेंट, बट दैट इज नॉट पार्ट ऑफ कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन. Capital formation is specifically investment which is being done in capital assets, goods that help in production of other goods. That is what capital formation is. Machines that industries buy. How many machines is an industry buying? When we say that an industry is expanding, we see that how much machinery is it buying, how much increased capacity is the industry, how much increase in capacity is the industry now doing. That is what is meant by this term capital formation. Explain the concept of investment in an economy in terms of capital formation. So capital formation क्या है? Capital formation is how much investment is there in the economy in order to improve its productive capability. Why is land not included? Land is not included because in case of land, buying and selling of land, it is merely a change of ownership. Land exists. Land has not come into existence. Land already exists. केवल somebody has changed the ownership of land. That is why land is not part of capital formation. Land use may change, that's different. But a new capital good has come into existence, a new machinery has come into existence, a new metro rail has come into existence, which is going to facilitate people to be more productive and hence their output will increase. A new road has come into existence, facilitating faster movement of goods, of transport, and hence productivity of economy will increase. This is what is meant by investment in terms of capital formation. This is what is investment and capital formation. So gross fixed capital formation, how much new machineries, how much new capital goods, how much new capital investment is being undertaken in the economy by private sector as well as by public sector. That is what is meant by capital formation, investment in terms of capital formation. Discuss the factors to be considered while designing a concession agreement between public entity and a private entity. Now, what is a concession agreement? Simply a contract. Concession agreement is simply a contract between private entity and public entity. It is basically asking you, investment models का question है ये. Question that comes from the topic of investment models. Vijay Kelkar committee. PPP. This question is about formulating a PPP agreement, public-private partnership. A concession agreement between public entity and private entity. Factors that have to be considered while designing a concession agreement. Agreement between any two parties. I enter into an agreement with somebody. In that agreement, there would be certain terms and conditions that both of us will have to follow. We are bound by an agreement. I enter into agreement with somebody. Bound by an agreement as in terms and conditions would be mentioned, and we would have to abide ourselves with those terms. There would be certain risks that would be mentioned, and obviously I have entered into an agreement with somebody and that person has entered into an agreement with me. It would be in expectation of a reward. I will enter into agreement with somebody only when I expect that there would be some benefit that I can reap from this agreement. Same thing exactly is there in an agreement between public and private entity. Public and private entity में जब agreement होगा, when an agreement happens between public and private entity, that would also consider what would be the roles of each of these entities, what would be the responsibilities that they would perform, what would be the risks that they would assume or would be responsible for, and what would be the reward that each of them will reap. 4 R's. Factors that have to be considered. First, part of any agreement. एक general agreement की बात कर रहे हैं, अभी specific बात नहीं करिए. Any agreement will constitute division of these 4 R's between the parties to the agreement. Roles, responsibility, risks, and rewards. And what is special about public and private entity and a concession agreement between public and private entity? the important thing or factors that have to be considered while formulating such agreement is that how strictly it is enforced, how objectively it is framed, and what is the scope of its implementation, of what is the scope of the risks that it envisages. I'll repeat. In a public-private agreement, what are the important things that have to be considered? What is its enforceability? Agreement है, one part is public, सरकार है एक part agreement का, तो what is the enforceability? Can public, as in can government, enforce its will on the private sector with which it is entering into the agreement? Or will there be a case in which government would be hand in glove with the private sector interest and not enforce its rights even when it has to? So first part is enforceability of that agreement. Second important part in this private public concession agreement is concession agreement between public and private entities. What is the objectivity of the agreement? Is the agreement framed in a manner which increases disputes, increases misinterpretation at a later date, or has it been framed in a manner which minimizes disputes? The interpretation must be specific. There should not be any scope of misinterpretation, of reinterpretation or of reinterpretation. So an agreement is formed between two parties, it should be a definite agreement, an objective agreement. Objectivity honi chahiye. Second important aspect of an agreement, concession agreement between public and private entities. Third important aspect, this is the most important aspect. The nature of risks that have been envisaged, the scope of implementation of that agreement. Risks are the most important part. The nature of risks that have been envisaged. Does the agreement, third party bol raha hu, third point, important thing. Does the agreement has the scope of renegotiation in future in case a risk that has occurred was not envisaged while formulating? When public and private sector enter into an agreement with each other that we will construct a road between two cities, a national highway would be constructed between Delhi and Jaipur, and on that national highway private sector would be given the right to collect user fee in form of toll. Because the toll tax is high, people have not been using that road as was expected. It was expected that 1000 people will use that road and only 500 people are using that road. Why? Because the remaining 500 are going from an alternate route. That has also been developed by the government, and that development of new route is leading to compromise on traffic on first route. A private sector kya bolega? Private sector will say that because you have this route, new route has come up, or this old road has been repaired, the traffic on this route is less, and therefore the reward that I expected has not been met. Why has the reward not been met? Because the risk of an alternate route has actually materialized. एक risk था कि एक alternate route बन जाएगा जिसकी वजह से मेरा traffic divert हो जाएगा. That risk has actually materialized. And hence, the private sector will seek concession, will seek some concession with the government, will go to litigation with the government, against the government, that because of government's action, I am not able to earn money. Or for example, COVID happens, and because COVID happens, the number of vehicles plying on that highway have stopped almost. For 6 months, no vehicles will ply. The term of agreement is that you can collect for a period of 3 years. Ab 3 years mein se 6 months, 7 months, no vehicles are plying, and even after opening, the number of vehicles plying are less. Did you envisage such a risk while formulating the agreement? Does the agreement give you a scope to extend the period of collection of toll by, let's say, 1.5 years more? And what are the conditions under which you are going to renegotiate this agreement? That would be based on what is the nature of risks that have been envisaged, and does the agreement has the scope of renegotiation in future. The third aspect of an agreement between public and private sector. What is the scope of renegotiation based on what are the risks that have been envisaged and which are the risks that have not been envisaged? जो risks envisage हुए हैं उनके केस में scope of renegotiation of agreement क्या है, and जो risks envisage नहीं हुए हैं उस केस में scope of renegotiation of agreement क्या है? The third aspect of formulating an agreement between private and public entities. Three important factors that have to be considered. पहले हमने देखा 4 factors that are part of any agreement: roles, responsibility, risk and reward. And next, specifically with respect to public and private concession agreement, there are 3 important aspects: its enforceability, its objectivity in formulation, and its scope of renegotiation in light of envisaged and unenvisaged risks. This is about question number 11. Let's move on to the next question now. Question number 12. Explain the rationale behind Goods and Services Tax Compensation to States Act of 2017. How has COVID-19 impacted the GST compensation fund and created new federal tensions? Question is straightforward, easy. Those of you who have written exams this year would have certainly read hundreds of times in newspaper about this question. Would have read so many times about this question. GST Compensation to States Act 2017. When GST was envisaged in 2017, the states said that we are surrendering our powers to tax. We are pooling our powers. States would like to use the word surrender. As a neutral person, you can use the word pooling of power. Pooling of power between center and state to collect tax for better collection of tax, for better taxation system, for a more efficient taxation system, and for a better collection of taxes. So states said that we are surrendering our power to tax, and therefore, in case there is a revenue shortfall in the GST system, in case there is a revenue shortfall, we will not have the power, we will not have the wherewithal, we will not have the ability to increase taxes, because we no longer possess that power. We have surrendered that power, or we have pooled that power with the center, and therefore we will no longer retain that power. So आंसर को स्टार्ट जब करना है हमें कॉन्टेक्स्ट से करना है. We have to give the context that why is this GST compensation, क्वेश्चन में पूछा यही है, rationale behind. What is the rationale behind this GST Compensation to States Act? Rationale is in order to win over the compliance of states, in order to encourage states to participate in a new taxation system which is expected to be better for everybody, in order to encourage states to surrender their powers of taxation, surrender their sovereign powers or constitutional powers of taxation to other states and to center, so that this power can be exercised collectively for a better taxation system, a more efficient taxation system. And to encourage states for this more efficient taxation system, this act was envisaged, this act was created. Under this act, the central government has promised to compensate the states for any shortfall on account of implementation of GST. Remember, again, listen to the words carefully. Central government has given an assurance to states to compensate for any shortfall in their revenue regarding any shortfall in the revenue on account of implementation of GST. The average revenue preceding the 3 years when GST tax came, when GST Act became operational, the average growth of revenue of states was about 10%. And in order to win over the compliance of states for this better expectation, states were promised an average growth rate of 14%. States were promised an average growth rate of 14%. States agreed to this, and hence this GST Compensation Act was an assurance given to states to ask to ensure their compliance. Rational. How has COVID-19 impacted the GST compensation fund and created new federal tensions? How has COVID-19 impacted? Because of COVID-19, the revenue collections, especially the indirect tax collections of center and states, have dropped down drastically. Because of COVID-19, there has been closure of entire economic activity for at least 3 months and for partial economic activity for about 6 months. Even today, entire economy is not back fully on its tracks. We are not back fully on our track. You people are taking classes from your homes. The number of enrollments certainly has decreased in almost every in almost every coaching. So we are not back on track. So economy is still not, gyms for example, shopping malls for example, not back on track completely. Number of people going there have reduced drastically. Because people are not spending, because sales in the economy have gone down because of the closure of economy, and that has led to a drastic fall in collections of GST of both center and state. This drastic fall partly can be attributed to GST system and partly to the COVID. Remember, Nirmala Sitharaman ji used the term act of God. Why did she use this term act of God? It's a standard term which is used in parlance, financial parlance. What did she say? She said that it's an act of God, as in it's an act which has not been envisaged in this act, in this GST compensation fund, GST compensation state acts. COVID has happened. Revenue shortfall on account of COVID cannot be attributed to GST. States and center both are facing the issue of shortfall of revenue. It's not that only states are facing. Both state and center is facing the shortfall of revenue, drastic shortfall in revenue, tax collections. And that is because of COVID. That is not because of GST system. In fact, if you look at 3 years that have already passed, in no month or in no quarter did the requirement to compensate states for any shortfall arise. So therefore, states, if they say that there has been a shortfall and center is responsible to compensate them for the shortfall because of this particular act, the state can say that the shortfall is not on account of GST. Shortfall is on account of something which is an act of God. And this creates tensions. This is the source of tension. क्या क्वेश्चन में पूछा गया है? Creation of new federal tensions. How has COVID-19 impacted GST compensation fund and created new tensions, federal tensions? So this is what you will be writing, that how has tension been created. Tension create का source लिखना पड़ेगा. States asking the center to compensate for shortfall versus center's argument that shortfall is not just for state, it is for both center and state, and shortfall is not on account of GST system but is on the account of COVID, which has been said to be an act of God. And this creates tension, federal tension between center and states. In your answer, you should also write down about how have these tensions been fused, what is the mechanism to compensate states. The central government said that the central government calculated and states agreed on that what is the revenue shortfall that can be attributed out of the total shortfall, what is the shortfall that can be attributed to GST, and how will that shortfall be made up. The GST Compensation to States Act says that the compensation would be made from compensation fund. क्वेश्चन में पूछा गया है GST compensation fund. The act says that the compensation would be made from compensation fund, not from anything else, anywhere else. Compensation would not be made from income tax. Income tax central government collect करती है, income tax से central government नहीं पैसा देने वाली है. The act specifically states that the compensation would be done from compensation fund. And where will compensation fund receive money from? It will receive money from GST collections. And if GST collections are not there, there is no money in compensation fund. Compensation fund is made up from tax on certain luxury and sin goods. some goods which fall in 28% bracket, some sin goods, उसके ऊपर एक compensation cess लगाया जाता है, वहां से compensation fund में पैसा आता है. So if there is no money in the compensation fund, how can central government will simply raise the question, how can we compensate? And then a mechanism was devised in which central government borrowed at lesser interest rate, passed on that borrowing to the states so that they form part of state development loans, as in that is a loan by the state, not the center. And for that loan, and that is the extent to which central government has, that is the extent to which states have been compensated. In order to repay what has been borrowed, and obviously the interest that has to be paid back, center and state are contemplating that this compensation cess from which this compensation fund is made up, this compensation cess can be extended either in scope or in period. ये भी लिखना पड़ेगा आंसर में. जो borrowing हुई है, central government has paid 87,000 crores to states. Where will that 87,000 crores come from? That will come from either the center and state, either the GST council agreeing to increasing the goods on which compensation cess is levied, or increasing the period for which compensation cess is levied. 5 साल तक compensation करना है, June 2022 तक, till June 2020. Compensation would be done till that time. So that either after that compensation fund would cease to exist. So either compensation fund keeps on existing after that, or the number of goods which are part on which this compensation cess is levied, those goods increase, and from that you collect the extra revenue and help in paying back of the tax, help in paying back of the loan. That is about GST compensation fund and the federal tensions and the GST compensation act, compensation to states act. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Next question, question number 13 and 14, both these questions come from the same topic. Question number 13. What are the major factors responsible for making rice wheat system a success? In spite of this success, how has the system become the bane in India? देखो, see, very simple question, can be answered directly from your economics NCERT and your geography NCERT. Basic question, but again you need to have a proper structure in mind, proper points in mind while writing this answer. What are the major factors responsible for making rice wheat system a success? Rice wheat system is the most prominent cropping system in our country. Almost entire North India cultivates rice and wheat alternatively. What are the factors that have contributed to its success? As in, what are the factors that we have an excess cultivation of rice and wheat, so quote unquote prosperous cultivation of rice and wheat? The factors that have enabled this is availability of, पहले हम inputs की बात करेंगे, availability of inputs in form of quality seeds, fast maturing varieties or hybrid seeds, availability of irrigation facilities through an extensive network of canal, especially in North India where the soil is alluvial and where canals can be constructed, availability of subsidized fertilizers and not so costly pesticides. This has led to development of or success of this rice wheat system. From the marketing aspect, अभी हमने inputs की बात करी, from the marketing aspect, the assurance given by the farmer in form of MSP and the elaborate system of procurement, elaborate institutional system of procurement that has also encouraged the farmers to grow these crops in more and more quantity because there is an assured buyer in the market in form of FCI, and that has further contributed to success of this rice and wheat system. तो हम दोनों aspects लिखेंगे आंसर में, the input aspect and the institutional aspect. Input and institutional, both aspects we have to write. In spite of its success, it has become the bane. In spite of success, it has become the bane in India. Why has it become the bane in India? It has become a bane because there are so many problems that have been created because of this rice wheat system. Most importantly, degradation of soil and depletion of water table. You can write on that degradation soil. The requirement is different. These are fertilizer intensive crops. Soil gets degraded, land degradation, problem in almost all of North India. Depletion of water table, especially in those areas which are semi-arid, Haryana and Punjab and Western UP. You can write about this. Two important problems that have been created. Other problems. These have created two monoculture or biculture cropping systems. There is only rice wheat system, and that system is repeated over and over again, which leads to depletion of land resources. इसमें हम monoculture system की बात करेंगे. At the same time, the system creates vulnerability for the entire ecosystem, for the entire agriculture, because this rice wheat system has led to decrease in resilience of our cropping system. Decrease in resilience. They are vulnerable to attacks, and if they are vulnerable to attacks, if any pest attacks, any locust attack, or any fungal infection attack, or any kind of plant disease attacks, that will lead to destruction of entire crops, and hence farmers are at a greater risk because of this monoculture system. Another problem, it has created the problem of, again, this monoculture system, it has created the problem that resources to other crops are diverted, resources for other crops are diverted for only these crops, led to a situation in which production of other crops is not there and there is only surplus production in these two crops. Other crops which are also essential, for example pulses, their prices are high, and these crops their prices are low in the open market. Have created a problem of lack of storage, because there is so much surplus production of rice wheat system that the storage cannot accommodate for what is procured. Hence that leads to another problem of lots of wastage. So तीन problem बताइए आपको. First is regarding environmental problem, land degradation and depletion of water. That is certainly one problem. Another problem in this case, another problem would be this monoculture system. It creates the issue of vulnerability of crops. It creates the issue of lack of production of other crops or diversion of resources for other crops to these crops. Hence, the prices of other essential crops, they are usually high, and prices of these crops in the open market are low. Problem of surplus in one and deficiency in another. I hope you can write the answer to this. In spite of success, why has it become the bane of the system? Next question, number 14, last question that we'll discuss. Suggest measures to improve water storage and irrigation system to make its judicious use under depleting scenario. ये अपने आप कर सकते हो, मेरे को ऐसा लगता है. This question would be easy, as in it's a straightforward question. There is not much to straightforward question सबसे मुश्किल होते हैं क्योंकि उसमें लिखने के लिए पॉइंट्स नहीं मिल पाते हैं. You understand this question, you know what to write, but you probably are stuck of how many points or how to write. You probably would be writing the same thing again and again. So avoid doing that. How can you avoid? If you have read, then you will be able to avoid. Ways to improve water storage and irrigation system to make its judicious use under depleting scenario. What would be the subheadings? What would be the structure that you would be concerned with in this answer? First, ways to improve water storage. First, in the introduction part, write down about the water scenario in our country. Write down that with 17% population, we have about 4% of fresh water resources. Write down that it has been projected that by 2025 or 2030, we will be a water scarce nation. We are already a water stressed nation. In 1951, we were a water surplus nation. Surplus matlab per capita availability of water is more than 5,000 liters. Stressed matlab per capita availability of water is between 1200 to 5,000 liters. And water scarce would be when per capita availability is less than 1200 liters per person per day. So by 2025 to 2030, in this 5-year period, we are expected to become a water scarce country. We are already a water stressed country with per capita availability of somewhere around 1600 liters. So first introduction may write down about this, and then write down the need to develop water storage and improvement in irrigation system. तो पहले हमें context देना है. Now give us a subheading: measures to improve water storage. What measures can be used? Write down about traditional methods of rainwater harvesting. Write down about modern method of rainwater harvesting. Reducing water wastage. For example, concrete roads and concrete footpaths prevent seepage of water into earth. It leads to flowing down the water down the drains and then flowing of the water down to the rivers ultimately. If rainwater is allowed to flow down the rain because there is a concrete road and there is a concrete footpath, greenery वाला aspect लिखेंगे हम. Development of footpaths, for example, which have the ability to absorb water, seeping tiles के through. Rather than concrete, should have seeping tiles. You should have adequate amount of soil on the divider and on the footpath so that the water does not flow down the drain. The water on the road drains down in the sideways and is absorbed there. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि मिट्टी और गारे के अंदर चलना है. You should try to write answer in such a way. Improvement of water storage techniques. Improvement of irrigation systems. सबको मालूम है. Micro irrigation systems. You can write a lot about that. Write down about drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation. Write down about fertigation. Write down about the need to reduce the use of flood irrigation. Write down about need to develop seeds which require less amount of water. Write down about the need to prevent loss of water from evaporation on canals. Write down about the need to stop providing or to charge large consumers of water through pay on usage basis, including agriculture, which consumes about 70% of water. Electricity is provided free of cost and water is provided free of cost. That leads to less incentive to stop the wastage. If you start charging for water, nominal charge for water, nominal charge for electricity, that would create a huge disincentive to waste water, and hence irrigation system and irrigation efficiency can be improved. इतने सारे points बता दिए. Write all these points. Your answer for 15 marker would be ready. Okay, so with this we have come to the end of our discussion of 8 questions of economics that were asked this year. I hope you are able to realize that what is it that is required, what is the requirement of this examination, how should you approach your preparation, what are the topics that you should be focused on, what is the way in which you should be reading your NCERTs or any material that you read. It's not merely about having knowledge about some news item that has occurred. It's also about having knowledge about what is the basis of that news item, what is the rationale, what is the thing that informs that thing. So with this, I'll take your leave. I wish you all the best, all the very best for this examination. Take care of your health, take care of yourselves, of everybody around you. Let's meet in some other open session. Till then, it's a goodbye from my side. Enjoy.